you know, we would love to have the community sort of involved with this. There's also an opportunity to socialize if anyone's keen to stick around for a few beers at the end. I know the regulars in this group will be having a few beers afterwards. More than welcome to just sit and chat and get to know the group. And this is interactive. The chat function's there for you to kind of get involved throughout the evening. All the talks will have a Q&A going forward. So yeah, who I am, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ross Townsend. I'm a senior .NET consultant at Oscar. I've worked in the tech recruitment market for 3 years in the Northwest. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been running a number of community meetups and events. If you want to catch me on social media where you can find out more about any of the stuff that I'm involved in, then please do connect with me at any of the links below. So I've got a quick announcement from the SocialCode team here. There's something that we've been working on with regards to the space of the meetup community and feedback that we've received from people as to what they are interested in. So I'm going to take a second to hand over to Colin, who has been part of the team with me here at Oscar for a little while. And I'll just move to the next slide and hand over to Colin.
Hi, everyone. So I am kind of mirroring a little bit of what Ross does to cover the market that I recruit for, with a similar kind of ethos to Ross, but that's to launch a social driven meetup group for product people, which is the area that I kind of recruit in. So my background is I've actually worked in tech recruitment for over 15 years. For the big majority of that, I've worked in sort of product and project recruitment. So it's kind of my happy place, if you like. And I guess sort of learning a little bit from Ross, I've always wanted to do something like this, and he's a bit of a master in this space. So I've taken a little bit of inspiration from him to launch something with a similar ethos. There are a couple of really great meetup groups that exist. I think Product Tank being one to name check. But sort of speaking to people in the community, there was a sort of a feeling that there was a niche that wasn't being addressed. And this is where the Product Social aims to come in. So where we're sort of angling this is we're going to sort of address sort of real issues. The sort of the overriding theme from some of the other meetups are that some of them are great, but quite often talk about showcasing great products that those companies have created, or sort of implementing something out of the textbook, so to speak. We aim to sort of pick up topics of things like failure, things like sort of real issues. So to give an example, we've got one of our first speakers who's going to talk about managing product as a discipline within a sales-driven culture. To me, that's a real issue that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think that the community as a whole can benefit from learning from other companies' challenges, other people's mistakes, and that's basically the angle that we're coming from. Much like Ross and the SocialCode, we want people to actively participate. We want everyone to kind of encourage and welcome stories of failure, because we probably all learn more from failure than success and success stories. We want the community to give feedback on what they want to hear and what they want to be discussed. But ultimately, once we get past this horrific pandemic and we could all come together, I want to create a genuine social hub where people get to meet, share ideas, and create a real sense of community. And I'm in a fortunate position of being a kind of have that holistic view of the product market to be able to bring people together to do that. So looking forward to kind of being the driver of that moving forward. So enough from me and my dulcet Yorkshire tones. I'll hand back over to Ross, and please feel free to let your product colleagues know about this new meetup. First event, 13th of May. Thank you.
Cheers, Colin. I'll ask you if you can just bob a link to the event in the chat so that people can sign up if they're interested. Before we kind of start with our first speaker for the evening, I just want to take the time to say thank you to both Adam and Tim, who've worked extremely hard to deliver these talks on quite short notice. I'm really excited to hear both of them, and then to bore you all myself going forward. In probably the most surprising turn of events, I've actually managed to get our next event fully organised in time to announce it tonight. So we'll be going again on the 27th of May with the Social Code. And I will pop the details of that event in here at the end. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and introduce our first speaker of the evening. Adam Hutchison from over at Netsells has been working on some fantastic stuff around decoupling. Adam, I'm just going to give you the option to share your screen now.
Cheers, Ross.
You should be able to share that now.
Yep.
Perfect. I'll hand over to you now. Cheers, Adam.
What could people see Ross? Is that right?
Yeah, you can see me.
double Ross. There we go. Great. So yeah, thanks for having me. I do really appreciate that I've been invited, and it's and I do enjoy talking. So it's so it's nice to have a captive audience where people will have to listen to me for 20 minutes. So I'm Adam. I'm from an agency in York called Netsells, and we're an ever expanding agency. We've worked with some big names. We've got about 60 plus staff, about 10 years old now, and and we really well, we do quite a lot of things. We work with enterprise level clients that you can see on the screen, and we also work with as a digital kind of workshop, I suppose, where we'll take an idea from somebody that somebody has, and we'll flesh it out and we'll make it into a product for them, and then we'll build it. So we work with lots of different technologies. Our mobile stack is a mixture of Swift, Flutter, Java, and Kotlin. We use Nuxt and Vue.js for the front end, and then back end wise, we generally code stuff in PHP and Laravel with a sprinkling of .NET and Node as well. So that's who I am, where I'm from, and today I want to talk to you about decoupling. Well, actually, when I was asked to do this talk, I was kind of racking my brain about what I could do it about, and like any good software engineer, I thought, what can I reuse from stuff that I've done before? And I was sifting through my old talks, and I actually noticed a trend, and that trend was coupling and decoupling, and it's a prominent part of what we do as software developers, because there's a huge impact of not considering how systems are coupled together. So today I want to talk about kind of tightly coupled systems, what makes tightly coupled systems, what makes loosely coupled systems, why we should care about it, and also the consequences of not caring about it. So Robert C. Martin, for any kind of devs in the audience, I should also add that this isn't just aimed at devs. This is meant to be accessible to everybody. So I hope I've achieved that. But Robert C. Martin, he was one of the original crafters of the Agile Manifesto, and he's also a prominent figure in the software world. Uncle Bob is known as. So I think this quote sums it up really, really well. So if your software, if the requirements change and your software can't respond to those changes, then your architecture sucks. It does. And good architecture is easy to understand, it's easy to develop, it's easy to maintain, and it's easy to deploy. And tightly coupled systems absolutely play a part in that. When we talk about bad architecture, what we're actually talking about is tightly coupled systems. And I'm sure there's people here like myself that have lost count of the amount of times that we've been asked to make a change, a seemingly simple change on a piece of software that we're working on, and we've had to report back that we can't make that change because it's too complicated, or it's the estimate that we give for that change is way out of proportion with what people are trying, what the client is requesting. And so if we think about our architecture up front and we're considered about how we approach it, then we can avoid that. And what we can actually do is make it very resilient to change. That's what we're trying to achieve. So to start with, I want to start with something that's quite close to my heart, and it's not my children. They are relatively far from my heart presently. It's of course electricity. So looking at this, the eagle-eyed people in the audience will be looking at this and say, well, this is actually a phone line, and it is, but I want it to be dramatic with lots of different wires, so let's pretend it's electricity for the moment. Of course, there's electricity involved. So let's just imagine for a moment that every time we bought an electrical appliance, or we went to connect that electrical appliance to the wall, then this is what we are faced with. And of course, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think that we would have to even consider this in whenever we have to plug something in. And of course, what's missing is the humble plug socket. So bear with a plug socket. So what is a plug socket? Why is it important? Why am I talking about plug sockets? So there is a good reason. Plug sockets, if you think about it, they allow consistency. They allow you to buy a product from a manufacturer. They allow a manufacturer to be able to create the product in the first place. And when you go into a shop, you buy that product, you know exactly what you're going to get. You know that if you buy a product in the UK, you will get a plug, and that plug will fit into your socket at home. You can be pretty sure of that. Why is that important? Well, what I really wanted to point out is that plug socket is in fact an interface. And interfaces really form the fundamentals of how we interact with the whole world when you think about it. So you put the key into a door. Well, that's an interface. Of course, it's an interface. You know how to put a key into a door. You know how to put a plug into a plug socket. You know how to drive a car, and that's because there is a consistent interface there all of the time. So the rest of the world has this concept of an interface all kind of dialed, but it seems that sometimes us as software developers forget this concept of an interface. So that forms a large proportion of what, or it's a recurring theme in what I'm going to talk about tonight. So for this talk, we're going to focus on 3 different areas. So the first one is the general kind of mid-level of abstraction, and that's the actual application itself. And then we're going to zoom right into the software, and then we're going to zoom right out into the infrastructure. So hopefully I'll get through all of those things. So let's start with the application layers. So building modern software is difficult, as Martin Fowler, another signer of the Agile Manifesto, states. It's difficult, and us as software developers, it's our task, and it's also our responsibility to manage that complexity. And a very common way of doing that is by splitting up the application into 3 layers that almost every single application has to do in some form or another. So those different layers, as defined by Martin Fowler, are the presentation layer. So that can be the user interface, or it can be a JSON response for an API. And then you have the domain. That's the business logic. And then you have the data, so the persistence layer. So usually that takes the form of a database or a file system of some sort. You shouldn't confuse this with MVC. I'm sure people have heard of MVC before. This is at a higher level of abstraction than that. So what I want to talk about is how can we take this further. So MVC, or most modern frameworks use that pattern, and most modern frameworks will encourage you to use to split the application layers, as I've just stated. But how can we take that further? How can we further decouple, in this instance, the presentation layer from the rest of the application, and what are the benefits of actually doing that? So in order to understand that, I'm just going to explain what server-side rendering is to you. So server-side rendering, or well, what's a server? So a server is just a computer on the internet somewhere, and a browser will send a HTTP request to that server, to that computer, and that computer will serve up some HTML back to the browser. So that's how things, and there could be a database involved, and that's how things are sometimes still done, and that's certainly how they were done kind of 5 to 10 years ago, all of the time. Now, there are some limitations. There are some limitations with that. The problem, well, one of the fundamental problems, is that the presentation layer is fundamentally coupled to the back end, to the business logic, to the domain, and eventually the data layer. So how can we get around that? How can we decouple that presentation layer and separate it out, and what's the impact of that? And you can do that by something called API first design, and that's rather than building the back end to serve the HTML, you build the back end to just serve the data. So an API, let's just think about what API stands for: Application Programming Interface. So it is another interface, this word that crops up all of the time. And what kind of form does that take? Well, we at Netsells, we do this all of the time. This is just how we build things nowadays, but we don't build the front end and the back end in the same code base. We build an API that serves JSON. It's usually RESTful. And before we start any of the building, before we start any of the development, we design that API. So we'll use something like Swagger or Open API, as now is, and we will form a contract. And the benefits of that is that the front end know exactly what data to expect, and they don't have to. They're not coupled to our technology stack, but they're also not coupled to the backend's development time frame. So they don't have to wait for an endpoint to be or some kind of backend logic to be implemented before they can start their work. They know what they're going to get, and they know what they have to do to go and get that. So we design this specification up front. We give it to the front end, and then we've decoupled that that development lifecycle for those two products. Now, how does that look in terms of the app? Well, we build the back end, still has a database, and then we serve, and then there's some kind of client, and that client can be a mobile application, it can be a web application, some kind of JavaScript-based application, and they can make requests to the API, and then the browser, which would sit on the far left of this, the browser then interacts with the front end application, and it's and doesn't have to speak to the back end at all. It's all done through the front end. And that's the modern way of doing it. And the other thing that we can do that we couldn't do before is that we can then add a mobile application that can consume the same API. Before, we would have just had to build that API for the mobile app separately, but now we don't have to duplicate that effort. We can have the front end app and the mobile app consume the same thing, and we can have other APIs consume our API as well if we want to. So way more flexibility than we had before. In terms of future-proofing this, say for whatever reason there's some kind of crazy exciting new technology brought out for building mobile applications, or the mobile app just gets dated and it needs upgrading. Well, we can independently upgrade that from the back end. We don't have to touch the back end. The mobile app has that contract. It knows what it's going to accept, and it knows what it has to program to. And the same goes for the front end, and the same goes for the back end. We can rip that back end out and we can replace it with a new API as long as it conforms to that same specification. So lots more flexibility in that design. So we've been in that mid layer. I want to zoom right in, and this is I will give a little bit of a warning here. There is some code. It's very easy. I'm hoping that I can explain it to you. I'm hoping that I can explain it to you as I go along. So we're talking about specifically the back end here. So ignore the other bits, and we're talking about the back end. Now, when we build all of the back end services in the same code base, it's known as a monolith. So a monolithic architecture, and that's where you have the single code base written in PHP, Laravel, .NET, Django, whatever, and that contains various bits of code that perform that functionality. So now we're talking about how do we decouple the code that's within that monolithic architecture. So hopefully, the first thing that we would try and do is separate out our business logic, our domain layer, as Martin Fowler would say, our domain layer into separate services. And one service could be responsible for emails, it could be responsible for routing, authentication, etc., etc. But then how do we make sure, how do we increase the flexibility within those different services? How do we decouple one service from another? So let's zoom in and let's just focus on service X and service Y. So what does it mean for service X and service Y to be coupled? So what it means is that, so here we've got service X, and service Y has a dependency on service X. What do I mean by that? I mean that service Y can't exist without service X. Service X does something that service Y intrinsically needs in order to function. And as it stands, those two are coupled to one another. In order to explain this decoupling, I quickly need to have a segue into classes and objects. Feel free to switch off. There's plenty of diagrams later, but hopefully you'll follow along. So a class in programming, we have a paradigm. We have a method of programming called object-oriented programming. And what we do is we separate like functionality into something called a class, and we treat it as an object. Now that sounds really, really weird, and it is quite weird when you think about it, but it actually makes a lot of sense as well. So as developers, we have to manage complexity, and software it can get incredibly complicated incredibly quickly. I'm not saying that object-oriented programming stops that, but it can help. So what we do is we separate that functionality, we group it together, and we encapsulate it in something called a class. We hide it behind publicly available pieces of functionality that we can use throughout the application, and we don't have to know exactly what it's doing underneath the hood. That sounds quite vague, and it is quite vague, but I've got examples, so hopefully you'll understand that better. And we have classes and we have objects. A class is like a blueprint. So in this situation, we've got the blueprint of the car, and the object itself is a car. So the class is like the category of thing. So a car has, and classes have properties, and they also have things that they can do. They're called methods or functions. And but not every car has the same properties. It has the same well, no, they do have the same things that they can do, but they have different properties. So you can have a different body type, different color, different engine size, but it's still a car, but it's not the same car as something else. So that's the analogy. So here I have our service X. Our service X is a class, and from that class we can create an object. And this is very simple. This class, it just does one thing. So it has this function, this thing that it can do, has no properties. It has this thing that it can do, and that's add two numbers together. So this add function, it accepts two numbers, first number, second number. I named them well. And those two numbers are integers. That's what the int means before them. And then there's this colon. That means that this function will return an integer as well. And as you can see here, it just adds one number to the other. So I hope everybody can just follow that so far. So really simple. Diagrammatically, how it works, where you can think of that add function as a black box. It takes two numbers and it spits out another number. That's essentially what we're doing here. So here's service Y. Here's the service that has an intrinsic dependency on X. So this has one thing it can do, the get wages, and that accepts again two integers, so basic pay and overtime, and promises to return an integer. Now this is the bit that we're concerned about, the new service X. So this is where Y has an intrinsic dependency on service X. So it calls the add method from service X, it passes it the basic pay, and it passes it the overtime, and it calculates the wages, and then it returns the wages. So as it stands, Y is coupled to X. So how do we avoid that? How can we try and separate that out? And this seems trivial, and in this situation, of course, it is trivial, but it has massive impacts. It has massive business impacts. Quite a few times at Netsells, we've inherited legacy projects, so what we kind of deem as rescue projects, where the client comes to us because of our expertise, and then we're experts in certain frameworks, and we can take on these projects, and we can continue development for them. And a common thing that we're asked to do is replace payment gateways. Now, a payment gateway will be a class in an application, but imagine if that class is littered around the entire code base, touching 15, 20, 30 different parts of that code, and we're being asked to take out that piece of code and replace it with something else. So take out the Stripe code, replace it with Braintree. Absolute nightmare. That could be months worth of work for the client to do something that should be quite simple, or the client deems as quite simple. How do we get around it? Well, the shock horror, there's the interface. So interfaces are things in programming as well as in everyday life. And interfaces are contracts. Interfaces are promises by classes. So if a class implements an interface, then it promises to have the functions that are defined within that interface. So this interface here is called add numbers, and it forces a class to promise to have that add method that will have that will take those two different parameters, the first number, second number. They have to be integers, and it will return the other integer. This is our service X. So we've implemented add numbers. No change to the actual code because we already had that code. We already had that method implemented. But if we shoot over to service Y, we can see quite a profound consequence of it. Now, ignore the top bit here, and let's just have a look at this get wages. This get wages function that was there before. So again, we're still accepting the basic pay and overtime, both integers, and we're returning an integer. But rather than doing new service X, what we're now calling is this number service. And if we shoot up here, what we've actually done is this constructor is just a function that runs when a new object is created. Essentially, we've injected a number service, and we've not injected a specific service. We've injected an interface because this class doesn't actually care about how the addition of the numbers is done. It really doesn't care. What it cares about is, does it have an argument add? Sorry, does it have a method add? Does that method accept two integers and return me another integer? That's the only thing it cares about. So we've decoupled service X from service Y by using something called dependency injection, and ultimately what we've achieved with that is the inversion of control, a key concept in software development. So classes like Y, which we deem as in this situation anyway, it's high-level classes that are doing kind of business logic, should not depend on low-level implementations. Service Y should not depend on how service X works. All it needs to depend on is, all we're exposing to it is the minimum that it needs to know about, and that's the interface. So how it's going to interact with that service. Doesn't care what that service is. And what are the benefits of this? So there's a diagram of it. So the interface between service X and service Y. But the benefits are, well, if we need to, we can just rip service X out and we can just replace it with service T or service Z or service whatever, as long as those services have that add interface. As long as they implement that interface, then we can just unbolt and bolt on another service. And whilst in this context, of course, it's very, very simple. But in the context of a payment gateway or some kind of other more prone to change bit of code, this can change. This can save the clients in our case, or the people that are paying for the software development. It can save them thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it can mean that their application is less fragile, and it can mean that their application has greater longevity, and the developers that are on it have a greater productivity. So I'll quickly whiz this. I've realized I've been speaking for quite a long time now. So finally, for microservices, so now we've zoomed right into the software. Now we're zooming right out into the architecture, into the infrastructure, and we're talking about how that can decouple. So microservice is kind of like a buzzword, but what does it actually mean? So again, we've got our, should have taken the animations off, but we have our monolithic architecture in terms of the back end. Well, rather than having a single application or a single code base running on a single server managing all of the domain logic, with a microservice architecture, we split that out into multiple different services. So we don't just have the single API. We have we take our level of abstraction or a level of decoupling a stage further, and we physically house those different pieces of code, those different services, email service, authentication service, etc., in different code bases. And when they're deployed to different services. And they should have a different database as well to help with the decoupling. There is always a level of of coupling with these services. Of course, the email service has to know when to send an email. It may need to use a user service. There certainly has to be some kind of communication between them. But what is commonly done in order to facilitate that is to define an interface between those services. So that can be via HTTP, via endpoints that are hit, or another common way of doing it is through some kind of publish subscribe system, where you have essentially a queue service where one service will publish an event to that queue service, and another service will subscribe to that queue, and they will get the notifications and or the data whenever that service has published something that it's subscribed to. So we have all these services. Of course, we need to route HTTP traffic to it. So we need something like an API gateway, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, certainly for the more complicated architectures. And then that API gateway will dictate where that HTTP traffic goes. So what are the benefits? Well, firstly, we're not coupled to a single stack. If we build a monolith in a framework like Laravel, PHP framework, then that's it. You want to implement some kind of artificial intelligence functionality, well, which Python, is a leader on. Well, you can't. Not in that code base anyway. You have to develop some kind of. You have to use either a third-party integration, or you'll have to split that out to be a service by itself. If you're using a microservice architecture, well, you can just build that service in the best tool for the job, whether that be Python, Go, .NET, whatever. So there's absolutely, the only thing that has to be consistent there is the interface. So it is how they communicate with one another. So let's talk about microservice availability. If you have a monolithic architecture and you miss a semicolon, for those languages that need semicolons, only PHP, there, and you foolishly deploy that. Not sure what you should ask yourself the question how that's happened, if it ever does happen. But imagine it did, and that will bring the whole site down. So that's it. No kind of no backup. That's it. Job done. Site down. No users can access it. With microservices, well, some services are more crucial than others. Let's use the email service. That's less crucial than something like the authentication service. And so if that email service goes down, well, there's no real reason why the whole platform can't still work without that email service until the developers are able to get that back online again. So we've got this added increase in availability and kind of resilience to these errors. And then finally, we talk about scaling. So scaling a monolith, if you want to say you've got peak times of traffic and you need more compute power, how do you do that with a monolith? Well, you can scale it vertically, which is increasing the server size, or you can scale it horizontally, where you're essentially having replicas of the application, kind of working in tandem, and then you have a load balancer in front of that that's directing traffic to the instance of it that can take it, or that is most able to take it. But if you want to do that with a monolith, you have to scale the whole thing. So you have to pay for a whole server that can house the entire application. And hardware is cheap in comparison to kind of dev time, but it's when you're talking at the scale of kind of Facebook and Google and Netflix, the famous user of microservices, that could be millions of pounds a year. But with microservices, you're able to have a more granular control over which parts of it scale and which parts of it don't. And the final thing that you can also do is with a monolith, if you have as software developers, and any software developer that's worked on a monolith will know, if you come to the application from afresh, then it can take months to get your head into it. If it's a large application, really months. And quite often, people that are very good at that application, or very good, have a very deep knowledge of that application, they can become single points of failure for the business. With a microservice architecture, that can be that's minimized. You can, because by definition those services are small, you can ramp up the dev team and ramp down the dev team very quickly, and without that large period of time of learning what the application does and every single nook and cranny of it. Okay, so finally, what I want to kind of leave you with, again, another Robert C. Martin quote. So this really resonated with me when I read it, and one of our lead developer, Jakob, he may be here, he may not be, but I've done tons of interviews with him, and he always talks about the craft of software development. So not just knowing how a language, what you can do with a language, but what you should do with a language, and I couldn't agree more that the craft of development is the art of building decoupled systems. So systems that are independent of one another and that are resilient to change. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for that, Adam. Really appreciate it. Obviously, been a fantastic talk there. Just going to run through, if anyone's got any questions for Adam before we hand over to Tim for his talk, then please whack them in the chat now whilst we've got Adam for Q&A, because I'm aware that, thank you very much to Adam for giving up his time, but he has got childcare commitments. So, I don't want to keep him for too long when he's got that to go forward to. But no, generally, really appreciate that, Adam. It's been a great talk, and it's been much appreciated.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I'll just give it 1 second to see if anyone's going. Adam says, what's the best way to handle many microservice processes running over different servers? Oh, hang on. You've muted yourself and I have to unmute you 1 second. There you go.
Sorry, Ross, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so Adam said, what's the best way to handle many microservice processes running over different servers?
Yeah, so it's a really difficult question, and in that kind of context, you're probably looking at something like Kubernetes, or kind of Dockerizing the thing, and then having some kind of orchestration tool do the work for you. I would absolutely say that infrastructure as code is the absolute necessity there, combined with a very, very robust CI and CD pipeline. You don't want these things to be deployed or to get deployed unless they've been tested. But when you get to those kind of scales, and certainly like the scales of kind of Netflix, where you get thousands of microservices, it's really not a manual job. It's a job that needs to be orchestrated by a dedicated tool like Kubernetes.
Thank you. Roger says you spoke of the advantages of microservices, but what about the disadvantages?
yeah, there's tons. I realize that. Yeah, so absolutely not a silver bullet. So one massive disadvantage is the complexity, as I've just said, with the Kubernetes and deployment there. So microservices are really only suited to the businesses that need them, the applications that need them. They need those things that I've spoken about, like the savings on the infrastructure, like the ability to be able to ramp up dev teams quickly. For the average Joe application, and just about every single application that's done by a startup, developing it as a microservice is overkill. And it's usually a thing that's done retrospectively. But yeah, that's an incredibly good point. There is huge overhead and technical debt introduced. Maybe not technical debt, but technical experience required in order to orchestrate and effectively architect microservice systems. So you really have to know what you're doing. It's very easy to do it incorrectly as well. Quite often things like sharing of the database and stuff like that. So it's people half-heartedly do these things, and it quite often gets them in trouble.
Cheers. I think Steve asked a question, but you managed to answer it in one go there. But no, thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand over now to Tim for our next topic. And thank you very much, Adam. Tim, you should be able to unmute and share your screen there.
Excellent, thank you.
No worries. Just before Tim starts his talk this evening, he did send me an email today promising that he was going to present his entire talk through the medium of interpretive dance.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to hold him to that and just remind him that this is being recorded.
Excellent. So I've got JLS warming up in the other room, so you should be ready to go in a second. But no, there'll be no dancing. There's a few Always Sunny in Philadelphia memes included in my talk. So hopefully that's entertaining enough for everybody, for any Sunny fans out there. But yeah, so can everyone see my screen okay? I'm just going to say yes. So hello everyone, and it's great to be here virtually with the SocialCode and to have the opportunity to share some of my experiences with you. The focus of my talk today is really on the evolving role of product management. So a bit of a guinea pig for the product social, but I really want to talk about how good product leadership can really empower teams to innovate and solve hard problems, and the impact that bad leadership can have. So it's very much a general industry talk presented through the product lens, and following on from some of my experiences in the industry. And I hope you can find it useful for kind of your areas as well. So before we jump in, a quick introduction. So my name is Tim Potter, no relation to Harry, and I am a product manager at InPost, and I'm working in the logistics and fulfillment domain. My focus there is primarily on strategic direction for our consumer products. So my role is very much that of a growth product manager, and I touch on everything from user acquisition, onboarding, to retention and churn. I was previously a lead BA working on platform at Sorted Group in Manchester. And my other claim to fame is that I was the fourth wheel in a team that won a Hack Manchester challenge back in 2009. So that was the proudest day of my life. And shout out to Hack Manchester, rest in peace. Okay, so agenda for today. I'm going to give a quick, slightly brief introduction to product management and an overview of the PM skill set. I'm going to talk about how company culture can impact the role of a product manager and how that would affect engineering teams. And then the three-legged stool, which is an agile concept, and how good product leadership can empower teams. Okay. So really, just to start off, product management is having a moment in our industry. A lot of companies are seeing the value that good product leadership can bring to their organization, and they're investing heavily in that area. So whether they're growing an existing team or integrating a new product faculty, it's really a good time to be a product manager. There's a high demand for skilled PMs, not a lot of skilled PMs. And this can be seen in Greater Manchester, where we've had 21% growth in the PM role year on year. So thanks for that, Ross. Thanks for that insight. So really, okay, so let's start with the basics then. Well, what is product management? Well, it's an organizational function within a company dealing with new product development, business justification, planning, verification, forecasting, pricing, launch, and marketing of a product or products at all stages of the product lifecycle. Okay, so that's a quote from some Wikipedia editor somewhere. Now, while I fundamentally agree with that as a definition of what we do, it's very hard to penetrate. There's quite a lot there to unpack and digest, and it doesn't really give a good indication for somebody who's not in a product role what it's all about. So, you know, from an engineer, that means absolutely nothing. And so the good news is, while the list of responsibilities might be accurate, in my experience, the actual function that a modern PM is performing can be distilled down into three simple words: communicate, collaborate, and create. Now, I'm going to be focusing on how PMs communicate and collaborate within their organization. So how we communicate and collaborate with engineering teams specifically. And really how effective product leadership creates empowered teams. So I just want to quickly talk about the skill set of a PM. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with this. I'm going to make it quite fun. So the fundamental skill of any product manager is the ability to communicate effectively. So communication. And any good PM will always start with listening first, so AKA the skill set of reception. We receive inputs from a wide range of communication sources across an organization. So anywhere from our internal teams to customers, to investors, to our competitors. We're just constantly receiving noise and inputs. And a lot of the time, our brains look like this, trying to piece everything together. And what we really need to do is understand what is valuable and extract signal from noise interpretation. And we'll use different methods to do that, such as data analysis, or abstraction. And a great example of abstraction is the story of the man who came to Henry Ford and said, "Make me a faster horse." Now, through abstraction, we can identify that, well, the actual ask behind that isn't that this person wants a faster horse, they want a faster mode of transport. And that might seem obvious looking back at it, but that's kind of some of the work that product managers do. So we'll do a lot of different things in interpretation to identify a course of action, separate signal from noise, and arrive at glorious determination. So at determination, we've decided on the course of action, and maybe we've got clarity in this area. So maybe we've decided to reprioritize, descope, or even accelerate features within our product backlog or our team's backlog. Perhaps we have identified the need to create a faster mode of transport from that. So the PM essentially acts as the connective tissue between intention and execution, which I'm going to talk about in a lot more detail coming up within an organization. So once we've decided on a course of action, we need to define the problem and craft a narrative as to why it needs solving. And we do that through messaging and alignment. Okay, cool. Now, once we've crafted that message, we then need to transmit it. So what we need to do is we need to get buy-in. And we don't just need to get buy-in from stakeholders and sign off. We need to get engineering buy-in. We need to get design buy-in. And we need to collaboratively convince you guys of what the North Star or that light bulb moment is going to be for this feature that we're going to build. So we need to come to you and say, guys, we need to build a faster horse. You need to want to build that faster horse. So going forward, I want to talk a bit about the different roles that a product manager plays and how the different types of organization structures can really affect that and affect how they kind of collaborate with different disciplines within tech. So if you work in tech, how your company culture defines product is likely to be either vertically or laterally structured. Now, as a PM, this is really important to understand. So whether you're a new PM or an established PM, this is going to influence how you work, communicate, collaborate across your organization. Now, I don't believe you can define company culture as simply an A or a B. And most companies fall somewhere on a spectrum between the two. So vertical organizations operate top down, and the disciplines within a product team are often siloed. So what we're talking about there is engineering, design, and product. And because of this, they don't usually communicate, or if they do, they don't communicate very well. So it's poor, and they don't really work in a collaborative way either. And I'll talk about a few examples of that as we go forward. Now, lateral organizations, now they're good. They're much more agile, and they bring cross-functional teams together to define a product's purpose, its function, and its field. So working collaboratively on the product at the same time, that's the key. The product owner becomes a member of that cross-functional team. So a lot of you probably in your day-to-day will work with a product owner or a product manager, and some of you won't, but that's just down to your company structure. But in this kind of example, the product owner, whether they're a technical product owner or a business product owner, or even a marketing product owner, are going to come in and they're going to work directly with that cross-functional team. So think of lateral teams as kind of almost micro companies within a bigger business, if that makes sense. So these companies have massive differences about how the product manager engages with their engineers. And one thing I just want to shout out to, well, I think of lateral companies as agile. I don't mean that in the way of, oh, we've got a Scrum board, we do Kanban. It's more the case of you're operationally agile, while vertical companies can be operationally fragile in the sense that if something goes wrong at a top-down company, things tend to break a lot quicker than they do in laterally structured companies because there's a lot more flexibility built into the operating model. So, okay, I think the best example of a vertical company is one whose product culture is sales or marketing led. So in these companies, the ideation, problem definition, or product strategy is defined at the top of the process. And often predefined solutions are then handed down to teams to execute on. And the role the PM will play in this type of organization is almost like an ivory tower product manager. And I hate ivory tower product management, but they'll mostly be focused on growth and retention, and they'll be at the top of the chain. They won't be engaging with the engineering teams as much as they really should. And this flows both ways. So engineers, you're not getting off the hook. In companies with an engineering-led product culture, developers and architects will build and execute infrastructure and then hand down a complete product to the business. And in those cases, the product manager role is very much that of a technical product owner. They're working with the team to ensure that they're kind of getting answers to their business questions and just ensuring that that team is able to kind of deliver those technical products. So again, very different role, a very different skill set depending on the type of company you work for. Now, the worst example is where both sales and engineering led, let's say, strategies are combining and both are trying to essentially lead the product culture at the same time. So this is where, sales are selling features that might not exist and engineers want to work on maybe infrastructure or different features to sell. And that's the worst example of a vertical fragile company. And from an audience perspective, I'm sure most of you as engineers or in your roles have experience working in one or more of these top-down organizations. Now, whatever way you lead in terms of product, the results are usually equally disjointed. And in my experience, most top-down companies create a gap between a product's intention and its execution. And usually the more vertical the culture, the wider the gap becomes. So firstly, what do I really mean by intention and execution? So going back to the example we talked about as a bit of a joke of a faster horse, right? And let's say the interpretation the PM has decided is that the solution to this problem is to simply use 2 horses and a cart. So in our top-down approach, the engineering team don't really have a say. They're not involved in the ideation. They're just assigned a feature to build this more or less fully fleshed out idea of 2 horses and a cart. And very quickly in development, it becomes apparent that the average horse's gallop, let's say, is 20 miles an hour. Now, anyone with a basic understanding of physics will know that 2 horses running does not immediately equate to 40 miles an hour. So what we've actually done in this case is we've made a more powerful mode of transport that can travel longer distance, but not a faster one. And therein lies the gap between what our intention was and what the execution of what we did was. And bad product management, bad leadership, top-down approaches just make these gaps all the more apparent, and you just cost money, cost time building features and products that don't actually meet our kind of objective and what we're trying to do. Right? And one thing I did notice is the role of the modern PM is really to sit within this gap between intention and execution, where intention is what the business wants to achieve, and execution is the development of that, and to ensure that both things remain aligned at all times. And teams are working laterally and collaboratively. So a good quote to sum up this is essentially that organizational design influences product design significantly. So if the relationship between intention and execution is broken, your products will be broken too. Your engineers will be miserable and working in that vertical structure. So one thing, a lot of engineers don't want is predefined work, fully fleshed out features, a top-down approach, and they just feel disempowered. And when engineers feel disempowered, they don't buy in. And I think this is going to align close to kind of maybe what Ross is going to talk about in his talk about the idea of burnout in the tech industry. And vertical cultures burn you out. Bad product leadership burns people out. Okay. So what we talked about in lateral organization is the idea of cross-functional teams as opposed to top-down. So that's working collaboratively on a product at the same time. And in this case, the product owner comes down from the ivory tower and becomes a member of that cross-functional team. Think of it, as we said, it's a micro company in a bigger business. And this structure of product design and engineering, and you can add as many roles as you want to this. You can have your architecture, you can have your QA, you can have your DevOps, etc., all in here. But the common example of a three-legged stool is product engineering design. The EPD structure, it's engineering, product design, and the way we structure this is all sides need to be equal. So the idea of a three-legged stool, if you make one side bigger, you're going to have a wonky stool, it's going to fall over. But all sides need to be equal, and they need to have an equal say and an equal voice and an equal understanding of what we're trying to achieve, with this feature or this product, or what we're trying to achieve as a team. And you can see kind of when you structure teams in this way, the intention versus execution line is down the middle, and it's shared between all three. So at the point that all three cross over, everyone's aware of what the intention is, and everyone is also aware of what the execution is. It doesn't rely on the product manager to tie everything together, because the team is self-serving, they're collaborating, and they're trying to meet that goal together. And yeah, just a final point on that, actually. Each function of an EPD, so a three-legged stool, they should be involved and aligned from the very beginning to the end. And one of the things I always try and get across with my engineering teams or my squads is the idea that I want you to be in on the light bulb moment when I have it as well. I don't just want to prescribe to you a solution and have you go and design that solution. I want to give you problems. So what that really means in this case is, a big part of my philosophy as a PM is that product managers should be assigning teams problems to solve instead of predefined work. So in that previous example, I talked about the kind of the 2-horse cart. That's a predefined piece of work. And that's bad product management. And what we should be doing is facilitating inclusive, participatory problem solving to empower our team. So let's take that horse example again, and let's do it from how you do it in a three-legged stool or in a lateral example. So in this example, the product manager comes to the team with a high level objective, some business context and data. And the objective is we need to build a faster mode of personal transport. So in our lateral approach, what we'll do is we'll bring together a diverse mix of people across the business, from product, engineering, design, user research, support, analytics, DevOps, etc., etc., etc. We'll come together as a cross-functional team and design a solution to that problem, as opposed to be, told the solution to that problem. And spend time brainstorming, exploring a wide variety of ideas, prototyping and testing, potentially in a design sprint. I'm not sure if you guys had the chance to run a design sprint in your careers yet. That's like a 5-day design sprint, and from ideation straight through to kind of a prototype of what that would be. And so through that process, we're creating a much more collaborative way of working. Everyone's empowered, everyone's engaged, and hopefully enjoying the work that they're doing. And they all have a say in what we're trying to develop and design. And in that, by the time we finish that design sprint, the group decides that they should implement a cart with 3 horses. No, I'm joking. The design they'd actually come back with in this case is the mechanical bike. And through that, we've actually leveraged an enormous amount of creative energy from our team that would have been completely wasted otherwise if we had dictated to them in terms of what we wanted them to do. So in that case, we're empowering our teams, we're empowering our engineers, we're using their kind of inherent creative energy, because engineers are creative problem solvers. And I think a lot of people forget that when you kind of work in a feature farm environment where you're just kind of throwing work at people, or you're just pulling things from the backlog. You want people to be involved. You want them to have that light bulb moment. You want them to, be part of participatory problem solving and feel empowered. And hopefully through structuring your squads and the way you work and your philosophy around that, you're going to retain good talent. You're going to keep people on board. You're not going to burn them out. They're going to stay with your company for longer because they feel bought into the ideas that you're giving them, because they have a say, they own a piece of that pie. So really, again, I wanted this to be quite a short talk. I wanted quite just more of a kind of formal chat and just share some of my experiences. And yeah, the idea is to get across here is top-down companies tend to always have the same problem, where they have a difference between the kind of, what we're trying to achieve and the execution of that. And more companies should be moving to more of a kind of, let's say, a lateral product structure, where they have multiple squads that are all kind of in problem solving mode and delivering kind of value for that business. And I think companies will see they'll retain their talent and they'll feel bought into that, and they'll start to innovate in their own areas. And that is it, really. I'm going to open up obviously to questions. I'll hand back over to Ross, and hopefully you guys found that at least in some way insightful or useful. And maybe some of you have worked in top-down companies before. Maybe you currently do. Maybe you're dreadfully unhappy, or you might love it. It'd be good to hear from you guys and hear kind of your experiences as well in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Really appreciate that. I'll open the chat to everybody now. I apologize, I just had to move when I realized that I've managed to come to work without a laptop charger today, so I've had to move to the desk that has a laptop charger out of the podcast studio. But really appreciate that. It was a fantastic talk. If anyone's got any questions to run by Tim, then please do. I'll leave the chat open now, give everyone a minute to kind of go through that. No, just lots of great talk. Anyone got any questions or anything like that? I won't keep Tim too long if he needs to. Stephen says, have you been in companies that have moved from a top-down to a lateral?
That's a really good question, and I can honestly say I haven't. I think what you find is with companies, they tend to be quite stuck in their ways. Change management, well, depending on the size of the company, but change management usually requires a huge kind of program of work and scope change to actually influence that. So it's very difficult to convince companies of the benefits of working in a lateral way if they've just worked in top down for so long. But that's not to say that it's impossible or it's the right thing to do in that case. But yeah, good question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim. Anyone else whilst we've got Tim here? Martin says, you talked about collaboration. How do you balance the input from tech and sales and decide when customers' needs have to be held back to build a better service?
It's a good question. And it goes back to those kind of, let's say, the interpretation within the PM skill set. And yeah, I think everything has a knock-on effect. So, you know, prioritizing one thing over another. But usually what you have is the idea of, as a company and in product, you have the idea of a North Star metric. And that's something I like to set within my product teams, is to say, right, what is our North Star metric where we can quantify that every input or everything we do essentially moves that North Star metric in a positive direction? Because a North Star metric is a value that relates to that, you know, it's a metric and a numeric metric that relates to revenue directly. So when we kind of look at prioritization, it usually comes down to revenue, but you want it to also, and hopefully that made sense.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tim. Anyone else got any other questions before we wrap up the evening?
I think just to add on Martin's point there, that I kind of got to say is, when you have a North Star metric, it's a lot easier to make the case of deprioritizing a piece of work, because you can quantify the value of what each piece of work in your backlog is going to provide towards your metric and revenue generation. So that's kind of why a North Star metric is very important for most businesses to have in product.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate that. If anyone wants to chat with Tim further, I'm sure you can reach out to him in the chat. I'll make sure to put on the meetup page the link to go back and watch Tim's talk. Really do appreciate your time, though, Tim. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciated it.
Thanks. So something that people may have noticed at the start of the evening is that unfortunately we don't have a sponsor tonight. The sponsor that we did have dropped out. What I do have, courtesy of Oscar though, because I did forget after the first talk for this, is we have got some lovely laptop bags to be able to give away to everyone, because I didn't want anyone to go home empty-handed. So as always, I've got the random number generator on my end. I would share my screen, but I've just set it up ready to do a talk. But with the number of people that are left in, just going through now. So I've got the first of three will go to number 18, which is Hal Wood. If you can drop me a message, Hal, after I finish my talk, I'll sort out a laptop bag for you to be posted out to you free of charge. And also number 28, as I'd said, it shows up on my end, slightly different to the other order for people. So I've got Mark Rosenblum. If you can drop me a message at the end of my talk as well, I'll sort you out with a free laptop bag, and I'll give away another one after I've finished. So I suppose I should probably start sharing my screen. This is the first time I've done one of these for a little while, but I'm really looking forward to it. I'd say thanks for having me, but I did organize the event, so I feel like I've just kind of forced my way in front of people. Can someone who has got their, where's the camera just gone? Can someone just pop in the chat to let me know that you can see my screen okay? Yeah, you can see my screen, perfect. Well, I'm going to sort of discuss a couple of things with regards to burnout in the tech industry. It's a topic that I've been wanting to cover for a little while. And I'll sort of take it, I suppose, from here. So yeah, to cover off, you know, what we've got. I can see the chat here, Ian. I apologise, I've not really got any gifts in this talk. But yeah, just for what we're going to cover off for this talk, I had 7 areas that 6 areas plus a Q&A that I kind of wanted to cover off with the talk for the evening. With regards to burnout, I think it's a word that so many people are using and are hearing on a daily basis. especially in the software development industry, the tech industry in general. But it's not something that's really touched upon beyond the word. No one really kind of pushes into the depths of what these things are. So I kind of wanted to cover a number of different areas. So first of all, I'll go through define burnout and how to identify it, not only in yourself, but also in those around you. Discuss sort of the problems it can face, and then how burnout has kind of changed in a post-COVID-19 world. And then very much it's focused around the idea of burnout-related environments for either yourself or your team, and also my own experiences kind of moving forward. So I just kind of want to use this to give an open and honest reflection on myself. I think I've been running these meetups for a number of years now, and I always put on a sort of a very positive facade. I'm a senior consultant at Oscar. I've been here for about 5 months now, but I've got 3 years in tech recruitment in the Northwest. Whilst I appreciate recruitment is not software development, the two industries do overlap massively in terms of I'm involved with software developers on a daily basis. I discuss burnout on a daily basis, and the pressures that we face have been extremely similar. So I have used my own experience, but also the experiences of those who've been kind enough to be open with me going forward with regards to how I've prepared this talk for this evening. I'll be the first to admit, I really am not a fan of working from home. I'm a people person. I like being around people. And during lockdown, I was one of those people who really struggled to separate my personal life and my work life. At the time, my living situation meant that my home office was also my bedroom. So I had about sort of 6 feet of separation from where I slept and where I worked. And it didn't really do me a lot of good because I wasn't sort of proactively trying to create that separation between my personal life and my work life. And since lockdown hit, I burned out pretty badly twice when I was in my last role. I am doing a lot better now. I've learned to sort of cope and manage and do sort of better things. But I suppose I've never really discussed it or been open about it within this group, but I was kind of in the position where I burned out badly to the extent that I did make myself very ill and did have to receive sort of long-term treatment for it. Whilst I appreciate this is a massive negative on that front, you know, I did make myself physically and mentally ill. I wanted to use my experience once I sort of focused on coping mechanisms and things to help me moving forward. I was really keen to become an advocate for creating an anti-burnout environment because I can see what it leads to. I don't claim to be a mental health expert or a physical health expert or even sort of a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm using this talk to discuss from my own experiences. And if one person can avoid burnout going forward as a result of anything that I say here, that's a massive positive for me. But everyone's experience is going to be different. I just kind of want to create an open and honest culture for people to talk. So the main thing I think when people define burnout is, you know, how do you define it? How do you identify burnout? What does burnout kind of look like in comparison to what the stereotype may be? Because I think the automatic assumption is that burnout is, you know, a physical act where you kind of can't cope any longer with the demands of life. But the reality of burnout is it's a physical or a mental collapse caused by overwork or stress, as per the dictionary. But the reality of it is it can result in so much more, and it's a lot more than just what is kind of said on a piece of paper or what a dictionary would state. In 2019, the World Health Organization recognized burnout and defined it as an occupational phenomenon. That means it's not a medically diagnosed disease, but it's a phenomenon that can seriously affect you and lead to other things. But the reality of it is everyone's experiences with burnout are completely different. Their thoughts, their feelings, everyone deals with things in a different way. And the reality of it is if you feel overwhelmed in any way with the circumstances of life, that is burnout. That may mean that your emotions play out differently, that your physical feelings play out differently, that your reaction to everything plays out differently, but it comes from a sense of being overwhelmed, and that can transpire in many different ways for people. But the reason that I kind of wanted to do this talk is I know that the tech industry has long had an association with burnout, but 78% of burnout cases cite workplace issues as the root cause of all of their burnout. And that is something that sort of really resonated with me and I thought was important to address going forward. To kind of put it into context for developers, there's a Twitter account called Destroy Today. It's a software developer. And I snipped this clip well over a year ago for a completely different talk that I did. But I've kept it ever since because it's something that I've always found really interesting as a visual demonstration of what burnout would look like. This is someone who worked the same number of hours every single day, turned up to their job and felt that they were putting the same level of effort in, and they were able to illustrate the exact point at which they felt that they started burning out. As you can see from the arrows here, where they started burning out and then where they fully burnt out, you can see that their productivity and their contributions drop off a cliff, and that's kind of the point that we get to. The reality is burnout does cause a number of problems. It kind of creates several issues, and I kind of wanted to address that, to put everything in perspective so that you can look at it and sort of be proactive. So first of all, burnout can affect you both personally and professionally. I wanted to cover off both fronts so that we can kind of address it in different areas. On a personal front, burnout can cause three main feelings, which then spiral off into something else. The first is a feeling of tiredness and or exhaustion. And I feel like every single person who has worked a day in their life here will say that they've sat there at some point and just felt absolutely wiped out from doing their day job. And that's the reality of it. We probably all have experienced burnout to an extent, the level of which may be different for everyone, but we probably all have. That's then sort of followed by a lack of enthusiasm or even negativity towards not only your employment, but also other things in life. It makes it really hard to get motivated for stuff. It really makes it hard for you to feel positive about anything going forward. And the last one, that was something that kind of the World Health Organization really pinpointed when they were discussing the idea of burnout in their report in 2019, was that sadness and a lack of hope are a direct result of the other two feelings and can pinpoint burnout when you begin to feel as if things just aren't going to get any better, or things aren't easier and that you're going to struggle on that front. And all of these three things together can often lead to a much wider range of physical and emotional feelings. And the reality of that is that's where we really do start to see the serious problems. On a professional front, if you're burnt out, there's a few things. You're 63% more likely to take a sick day than someone who isn't burnt out. But as well as that, you are twice as likely, if not more, to leave your job. This is an issue that I've actually found has been exacerbated by the pandemic, because people who didn't want to leave their job because of the security that provided during the pandemic, even when they were burnt out, are now leaving in droves because the level of burnout which they feel makes them feel so much worse. This is particular for the tech industry, which has sort of faced such ridiculously high levels of pressure over the last few months. And the other thing that the World Health Organization found is that you are less likely by 85% to be confident in your own work performance. This is not in sense of just being good at your job, but it's also the confidence in the work that you're delivering on an individual project basis, on a day-to-day basis, right the way through to sort of the overall thing. But the reality of it is, and the thing that I think most people don't realize, is that if you allow yourself to get to a stage of burnout, 90% of burnout cases will also experience a physical or mental disease that can be diagnosed that is actually a result of their burnout. And that came from the World Psychiatry Association in 2016. And I, again, on the culture of being open with regards to my own experiences when I burned out, I have experienced this, and I have been one of that 90%, and it did lead to me suffering with mental illness going further forward. Like I said, I'm doing okay now, but I just kind of want to use this to demonstrate, please do be proactive about this going forward, because it does affect you. And the last thing I would want to see is anyone in this group ever feel that they were needing to suffer. So the changing face of burnout since the emergence of COVID-19 is something that I really wanted to kind of cover off, because I know that the reality of it is, going forward, burnout is different. Burnout looks a lot different to how it may have done this time. Well, not this time last year, because we'd already started entering a lockdown. That says a lot about time. But 18 months ago, burnout was a very different experience for a lot of people. And I really kind of wanted to cover off what's happened since then. Since we've locked down, and this is specific to the UK that I wanted to cover off, Google searches for signs of burnout are up 240% on average per day in the UK compared to this time 18 months ago. That includes other things that are kind of coming through in terms of burnout related searches, but this is the one that I think was probably the one that would resonate with most people, because that's the first thing that a lot of people would Google. With regards to the tech industry specifically, Limeade, who are a software research firm over in the US, did a study for the UK and found that 72% of people who are working in the software development lifecycle at this moment in time during lockdown say that they are suffering from at least some symptoms of burnout. So that's 3 in 4 people, and that's a big part of the reason why I wanted to do this talk, because I think following on the Andy's Man Club talk that we had last month, a lot of people have gone with the mantra of it's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to be tired and to be kind of, burned out as well. It's okay to kind of go from there. The other thing is that women in the tech industry do suffer disproportionately when it comes to burnout. So the same study by Limeade found that only 11% of women in the tech industry would consider themselves to have extremely positive well-being. Those who considered themselves to have positive well-being on top of this was only an extra 6%. So the reality of it is that 83% of women didn't consider themselves to have a positive state of well-being in the tech industry during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was something that I thought was an incredible statistic, because if you'd asked me to pick a number off the top of my head before I'd read that study, I probably would not have guessed anything remotely near that high. But it's a reality. What I will do, if anyone's interested, just pop it in the chat. I will provide a full link to this study afterwards for anyone to kind of read through. But yeah, if anyone is interested, please do let me know. The other thing is that working hours in the SDLC are up drastically in the UK since the pandemic began. As technology employees, I think the reality of this is tech was under so much pressure from the off, because the reality of it is we were the front line in getting, whether you work in software development, infrastructure, in any area of tech, really, people were on the front line of getting people moved over to that working from home environment. And the average is that working hours went up to 45 to 50 hours per week for someone who works specifically within the SDLC. For infrastructure, it was actually around 56 hours that it went up to. And that was included with DevOps as well. But the reality of it is those averages aren't really coming down. Since the pandemic started, people have upped their hours. And whilst they may have dropped a little bit, they've not come back to what people's contracted hours are or were before the lockdown. This is partially caused by the pressures of COVID-19 creating stresses upon companies. But I think the other thing is that the reality is people are unable to separate themselves from the notion of working from home versus working in the office. When you're working from home, it's a lot harder to switch off because your laptop's just there. You can just pop on, you can check some emails, you can do one more thing to fix that bug that was kind of nagging you all day. You can just do that little extra bit, and you just do a few extra hours here, a few extra hours there, and it really does all add up. And I think that's something that the people are doing a lot more than they would if they were only able to work in the office. The reality is, it's a good thing to create an anti-burnout environment for yourself when you're working at home. This is something that I set out to do, having burned out myself. I deliberately worked to kind of really improve my environment at home. I don't claim that any of these things are, silver bullets, big fixes, or things that are going to improve your life from the off. But the reality of it is, by creating an anti-burnout environment for yourself, by just doing a few little things, you really can improve the position that you're in when it comes to burnout. First of all, why is this important? Obvious one, it prevents burnout. It's the core focus. It's about creating an environment that's completely positive for you. It's about creating a situation where you are able to, not burn out. That's the reality of it. But I think the other thing is, a sense of separation allows you to switch off and do your own thing and feel comfortable with your life. I said in the presentation here that rather than just checking your emails all the time, just out of curiosity, by way of the chat, people who are working from home or have been working from home quite a lot, just how often do you kind of go through a scenario where something pops into your head with something you could have done at work that day, and you do just pop back on to sort something out, whether that's a bug fix or an email or a little reminder to do something. I'd be curious to kind of see that, because I think it's something that people are doing quite a lot. But also the other thing is, you will be more efficient. If you aren't burning out, everything that you do will be more efficient. You'll be a lot more productive, and therefore you'll need to spend less time working to get things done that you need to do. So how can we create an anti-burnout environment? First of all, ensure you have a defined boundary. This may sound, a little bit weird, or, it may sound a little odd when you look at the perspective, but most people have a home office who are working in technology. But this is often situated within a dual purpose room within homes, whether that's you've got your desk and chair in the living room, a bedroom, whatever it is. Creating a physical boundary with the home office allows you to separate yourself better and increases the sense of separation, and allows you to disassociate your work life from your home life. I'm not talking go and get planning permission and stick an extra wall up to build an office in your house. I'm not talking, anything extreme, but something that I found that really worked for me was that I actually just moved a chest of drawers around the room, so that I had to be on one side of the chest of drawers to work in my home office, and the other side of the chest of drawers to be in my bedroom. It really helped me because I had to step out of one side and move into the other. It does improve things when it comes to disassociating and switching off from work. Being strict with your times and being extremely strict is something that is very hard to do, because you always think you just want to do kind of one extra thing, one little thing whilst you're at home, because you don't have to commute. You can do little extra things to kind of go. Reality is, if you don't work late and you switch off by having some strict cut-off boundaries, you will feel so much better about the way that you are working. What I can do, I'm actually going to hold this up, because this is something that I do. I'm not going to show it closely because I don't know names or anything. This is my list that I write at the end of the day. That list is a list of absolute non-negotiables of things I have to achieve the next day in order to be allowed to go home. The reality of it is, if it's not on that list, it's not getting done if I get to 5:30. Everything that I do when I come in, I work through that list, I get it done. If I finish that list at 3 o'clock, I might do something easy. to kind of see myself through. Or I might start picking up those admin tasks that weren't essential. Or I might start picking up something new, or whatever it is. Stephen's just put in the chat, tomorrow starts the day before. And that's correct. I would read into a theory by a person called Ivy Lee, who said that the best thing to do is that the last thing you do before you finish work for the day is to write down 6 things that you want to achieve the next day. And they will enter your subconscious the night before, whilst you sleep, and you will be much more productive doing it. The key thing there is writing it down versus typing it, because you are 30% more likely to take in what you write down as to what you type. I'll let everyone read into Ivy Lee's theory in their own time, but that is something that I've been really focusing on, and it allows you to be strict. If it's not on that list, it doesn't need to be done. Getting outside as soon as you finish might sound like a weird one, but Stephen mentioned it in the chat before, but the idea of a false commute, it creates a sense of separation, and it allows you to kind of move and have positive benefits for your mental health, because you can recharge your batteries by getting fresh air in. For me, I literally have a short loop that I walk around the estate that I live on. I call it a false commute. It's a 15 to 20-minute walk that I will do at the end of the day, and it simulates the time that I would spend on a tram, but it gets me some fresh air, it gets my steps in, it makes me feel better. The other thing is dressing for the office. Again, it's a sense of separation. I'm not talking, put on a suit and tie. It's a software development community. Nobody does that. Like, I apologize to any developers here who do still wear a suit and tie to work. But the reality of it is, it's all about getting up and getting dressed in the morning is the important thing to do, just to create that sense of separation. If you are working in your pajamas, or if you are just doing that one little thing, when you're not quite creating that separation, it means that work seeps into your personal life. And that's an issue that you can kind of face going forward. So that is, kind of the 4 best tips I have on a personal level for avoiding burnout, creating an anti-burnout environment for yourself. But creating an anti-burnout environment for your team. So first of all, I wrote this aimed at those in a management position, but I realized as I was writing it, 80 to 90% of what I'm about to discuss here can be applied by anybody who's working in a team, speaking to their colleagues. Why is this important? Firstly, it reduces turnover. If employees are burnt out and, like we discussed before, therefore twice as likely to leave, it means you'll spend more time talking to people like me. And if sitting through 25 minutes of this isn't enough reason as to why you don't want to sit and talk to someone like me, that should be a good enough reason for you. If you're increasing the productivity of your staff, more stuff gets done. There's less pressure for you. There's less stress for managers. There's less pressure for your staff. You increase the confidence in your team. They're confident in their own work. They produce higher quality and they deliver better content. But I think the reality is, at the end of the day, you're human. No manager in a team would ever not care about their people. If you do, you're a bit of a sociopath. But I think the reality is, no one wants to see anyone get burned out and struggle. So that's kind of where we're at with it, going forward. But the reality is, for creating an anti-burnout culture for your team, I think the first thing that anyone can do, and this is why I say it applies to everyone, choose your language carefully when you are discussing the concept of burnout. Be open to discussing and addressing the scenario, but don't push people to disclose what they aren't comfortable with. I think the key thing here is, instead of using throwaway questions such as, how are you? Try something along the lines of, how is your well-being? It's the same question, but it's worded differently, and it has much more of an impact. And the reality is, it allows people to kind of add that different sense going forward. Aid boundary creation for your team. This isn't just something managers can do. It's something that you can help your colleagues and help your friends with. If there's something you can do to help someone create separation from their home life and their work life when working remotely, it's in the best interest of all parties. The best thing that anyone ever said to me when it came to this side of things was that focusing on flexibility and empathy will allow you to create a solution that works for you and fits within your needs. The third thing, this is definitely the one thing that I think is very much focused on management here, is evaluate your well-being strategy. You can provide tools and support to employees, whether this is something as simple as a small app or as big as a whole program. I'm not here to define what is right or what is wrong for a business, but the reality is, if you look at what your company currently does, is it fit for purpose? Does it provide that solution for staff? And has it been adapted since we've got through to COVID times? I looked into this, and I don't want to quote this as a statistic because I think that the source that I had needed probably a little bit more verification, but I saw a couple of places that said 2/3 of businesses haven't sourced to edit their well-being strategy documents since the COVID-19 pandemic began. That may not mean that they haven't worked on their well-being strategies for their employees, but it does actually mean that those documentations hadn't been updated. But I think the other thing is, by creating a flexible hybrid model within the team, it allows you to do what works for different people. There's probably a lot of people in this group at the moment who really do enjoy working from home. I think it's the best thing ever. They love the idea of not having to go into the office, and that's great. If that's you, perfect. There's probably a lot of you as well who really love being in the office, but I think the vast majority like the idea of having some form of hybrid going forward. By creating an individual strategy for everyone's needs, you can help people manage based entirely on their own needs. It may be that you have one person who will thrive and be the best that they will ever be working from home, and another person who will only ever thrive if they're in the office 5 days a week. That's fine. We work in an environment where people can communicate with each other digitally. Teams can work together virtually. Why can't one person do that from the office and the other person do that from home? Something that I'm massive on when I'm speaking to companies at the moment is that you need to be creating an opportunity for everyone to be doing what they want, rather than kind of saying, we'll do a bit of both or we'll do one or the other. Why can't people choose? If we've had a year successfully working from home, but a lot of people have struggled, why can't you pick what works for you? So yeah, moving forward from that, as someone who's kind of experienced a lot of this, I wanted to kind of put in here my advice for dealing with burnout for people who are already kind of suffering from burnout. If something that's come up in this talk has resonated with you and you feel like it's something that you may be suffering from, then please do understand that this is just from my own personal experience. It might not work for you, but if it can be of use, I'd want it to be of use. The reality is there are a lot of places that you can reach out to for anonymous confidential help or open public help, whatever you would prefer if you are suffering from burnout. If anyone does want to reach out to find access to some of those places, there is the option to message me privately on here on a confidential basis, in which I can provide you to some of the places that I have worked with in the past that have helped me moving forward. But again, there's no pressure to do so if you don't feel like you are comfortable with that. So moving on to my advice, I suppose I've kind of just covered off that first point. If you feel comfortable, reach out. Disclosing enables people around you to empathize with how you're feeling and allows people to create a support platform for you. But at the end of the day, this is mental health, this is burnout, and it's your own thing. No one can force you to overshare what you're not comfortable discussing, and you need to do what works for you. If that is keeping it to yourself at this point in time or keeping it to yourself for good, no one can force you to share that. But personally, I found that reaching out was beneficial. The second thing is, do not be afraid to take time out. The position I'm in now is that I started to feel some symptoms of burnout a few weeks ago, and I was able to be proactive about it. And I'm really fortunate to have a super supportive employer in Oscar, who were comfortable with the idea of me taking a few steps away from work for mental health reasons. I took a week off, and that was what I needed to feel okay. And there was no pressure on that front. But I think the big thing is to say no job will ever be more important than your mental health. You need to accept that at the end of the day, money is just a number, and yes, it might provide things and it might provide an income, but no job will ever be more important than feeling okay with your mental health, whether that's with burnout or anything else. Please do take time out if you think it's going to benefit you. This may sound like a bit of a daft one, and I've never been a huge advocate for exercise, purely because I've never been that into it. But the reality is, if you can, then please do exercise. I'm not talking doing something stupid, but my goal for a while was to make sure I did 10,000 steps every day. I would go for about an hour's walk after work, and it did help me clear my head massively. But on a personal level, I actually ended up losing 7 stone since last August. And that has really aided me with kind of improving myself. And it takes me a lot more to feel burnt out. I'm not saying that you need to kind of get yourself to the point where you're running marathons or anything like that, but it does really help you to do some form of exercise to help your body. The final sort of thing that I really found beneficial was to explore the concept of mindfulness. I want to make it clear, it doesn't work for everybody. I've explored it with some friends who kind of, you know, have not experienced the same benefits, but just starting with something simple. I actually started with an app called Headspace. It's a subscription for a few pounds a month, but they do have a month's free trial to see if you can get into it. I use Headspace every single day to improve my mindset and to help me feel better. And it's fantastic for the idea of burnout. I'm not saying that Headspace is the best app. It just happens to be the one that works for me. As always, with anything in technology, do your own research about what's going to be suitable for you. But the reality of it is mindfulness can be a massively beneficial way to improve things going forward. So yeah, I suppose from there, does anybody have any questions? So Joe, what do you do when everyone on your team has a faster velocity than you? Do you look for a different team, a different industry, or a different type of work? I pushed harder and got sicker, which was foolish. I can empathize with that, Joe, because that's a large part of the reason I kind of ended up burning out. I recently, well, I say recently, that's the case. I've had some fantastic stuff with Oscar, and they've been super supportive. The reality of it is, I pushed myself to a velocity that I thought was necessary in an old role, and I was pushing myself and comparing myself to everybody else. First of all, I think the reality is looking for a different team, a different industry, or a different type of work may be a last resort, but something that you can also look at. My reality, and the thing that I kind of measure myself in every day, is, have I got what I needed to do done? I'm not talking, comparing myself to anybody else. I set my own goals for my own ability. And as long as I achieve my own goals, then I think I become satisfied. And that's why I have this non-negotiables list that I deal with every single day, because the reality is that's tailored to me. They're my own goals. And it means that I'm not comparing myself to everyone else. I'm not saying that that's perfect. And it may be that you do need to look elsewhere. But at the end of the day, tailoring yourself to go at the speed that suits you is right. I think from that comment there, that it's all right to go at a different speed as long as you're being challenged. That's perfect. It's all about trying to set a speed that's capable for you. Find something that makes you want to be challenged in a good way, rather than challenging yourself in something that's going to make you burn out. If that is setting your own speed, if that is moving industry, whatever it is, I think that comment there is absolutely perfect. You cannot compare yourself to anyone else. You are you, and you are perfectly capable at what you do. And I think the reality of it is, you could go into any business, any company, any culture, and all of us could go in and find someone who's better than us at something that we do, and always push ourselves to be better and work. But we don't need to. We're good enough as we are. I apologize if that was a bit wordy, but yeah. Now, if anyone else has got any questions, please do run them by me. Stephen says, I feel that there's still a bit of a stigma on mental health, which is why people don't tend to talk to other people about issues they may be having. How do you bring up these issues? Who is the best person to talk to? Is it group sessions? First of all, I agree with you. There is a stigma on mental health. Something else, which is part of the reason why I continued to burn out in my previous position, was that I didn't feel enabled or supported by management in order to kind of avoid burnout. I felt that there was a stigma around the idea of me not being able to perform, and I wanted to ensure that I was delivering to a level that I thought other people expected of me. The reality of it is, there's no right or wrong answer about who is the best person to talk to. It's about who you feel comfortable reaching out to. There's various different levels about the support that you can have. I'm super fortunate that in my position, my line manager is someone that I'm extremely comfortable that if I was ever to be suffering, that I could reach out to, because I feel like she's someone that I can trust, and someone that is extremely supportive going forward since I've joined this business. But the reality of it is, in previous places, when I was starting to feel burned out, the only solution I had was to reach out to HR. There's no right or wrong answer with what the best thing is here. It's all about the person that you feel is going to provide you with the support. The first time I actually reached out, it wasn't in a work-related position at all. I reached out to someone that didn't actually know me. I took the time to explore one of the services that was available that I mentioned earlier on, that if anyone would like a link to, I'm more than happy to assist for. They were the people that I reached out to initially, and they helped me feel confident enough and comfortable enough to reach out to the people in a personal life. It's down to the individual. I agree there's a stigma on mental health still in the tech industry in particular. And I think it's a stigma that we need to challenge. No individual should feel responsible for challenging that, when the reality is it's all about looking after yourself. If there's ever a time to be selfish and put yourself first, it's when it comes to looking after your mental health. If anyone has got any other questions, please do fire them in the chat. I'll give it one more second before I sort of call it an evening and move on to the social part of the night. Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate it. Being open is something that I wanted to do for a while, but it's taken a little bit to get around to. But I'm glad that I've done it, and if this has benefited anyone in any way, then it's been totally worth it for me. Thanks for that, Rick. I really do appreciate that. If like I said, I don't claim to be an expert, but it's if it can help anyone, then it's worth it. At the end of the day, I'm gonna transition now to something a little bit more lighthearted. I've got another one of these to give away. I feel like no matter how many times we have a talk on mental health, it's going to be a ridiculous transition to me giving away a laptop bag at some point that actually happens. For those of you who are left for the evening, give me 1 second to actually manage to get my random name generator on. Like I said before, we are going to stick around and have social experience. I've just drawn my own name out of the random name generator. That's a great start. I bring one of these to work every day, so that's not going to be any good for me. I might take an extra one home for myself though, just in case I lose one. Who have we got? Number 15 on my list of attendees. John Smith, you have won yourself a free laptop bag. To the two people who won earlier as well, please can you drop me a DM now? I apologize. I did want to get it sorted earlier, but obviously was covering off multiple things in one go. And also to John as well, if you can drop me a message in the chat, I'll ensure that tomorrow morning when I come into the office, we post some stuff out to you. I know the last time we gave the laptop bags out, there was a bag full of goodies that we also sent inside the laptop bag going forward. I'm going to stop the recording now and move to the social part of the evening. There's no obligation for this, but if anyone would like to stay, I know we've got a great core group of people who have been involved in just staying for chat. Anyone's welcome. And if you just want to get to know some more people in the development community, that's completely fine. But if not, have a wonderful evening, and I'll speak to you all very soon.